Okay, like I said, we'll have the bell ringer after these two slides. I just didn't get to it Friday when it came to the vocab terms towards the end. But another name for the Catholic Reformation. What was it? Catholic Reformation? What's another name for it? What's another name for it? Connor. The Counter Reformation. Good job. Good job. So yeah, we've already talked about the Protestant Reformation, right? We've mentioned about that in Central Europe, right around where modern day Germany is. And who started that? What was his name? Paul. Martin Luther. Good job. And what did he do? What did he do? What was he famed for? Nailing wood up on the door. Chris, go ahead.
95.
Yeah, good job. So the 95 arguments against the Catholic Church. And he was obviously disgruntled with a lot of the corruption from a lot of these Catholic leaders. And he wanted to try to express his opinion about his grievances with the Catholic Church. And without this invention, chances are the word would not have spread. What was that invention again? Why? The printing press. Good job. So with the printing press, his 95 theses, his arguments could be spread all across Europe, which would challenge the power of the Catholic Church. Good. And then we talked about the English Reformation. So what happened there? Was it something similar with Martin Luther, or was this a totally different way of bringing on the Reformation in England? Go ahead, why? Okay.
Basically just went back and forth.
All right, so I like that you mentioned the Wars of the Roses. Okay, it was one of those events within English history. It lasted about 100 years, where these families were fighting for the throne. And we already talked about the Lancasters, the Yorks, right? So who was the king that came from the Wars of the Roses? What was his name? And he's the one who started the English Reformation. Oh, what? Henry VIII. Yep, good job. So Henry VIII, how did he break apart from the Catholic Church? What happened? What happened? So this was more of a personal issue, I guess, but if anything, this caused a separation from the church. Paul? Yeah, good job, good job. So he wanted to try to divorce his wife because she could not give him a male heir to the throne. So he decided, well, I want to get a divorce, and the Pope was not agreeing for that, right? And probably the reason for it is because he was married to the Princess of Spain. And chances are the Pope wanted to try to keep these countries together under the power of the Catholic Church. And if they would separate, then chances are we'd see warfare, we'd see conflict in Europe. So maybe if you're looking at it that way, the Pope's trying to keep these countries united under the Catholic Church. But we all know with power, right? The Catholic Church wants to hold on to that. So Henry VIII, he decides to separate himself from the Catholic Church and creates the English Church, right? The Church of England. And he used the power of the church and the state. Okay, we talked a little bit about Henry VIII. Yeah, we all remember his 6 wives. And we also talked a little bit about how he expanded England into becoming such of a stronger military threat, expanding its navy 10 times what it was before he became king. So that's important to note, especially when we talk about Elizabeth I a little bit more next chapter, and well, more this week here with the Age of Exploration, how these explorers are all looking for the riches here for England, the crown. All right, so with England, they separate, and then it actually goes through a little bit of a struggle. So Edward VI, he tries to push a lot of Protestant Reformation, Protestant reforms within England, and he does so, but it wasn't really him, right? He was pretty young at the time. He was around 10 years old when he became king. This was Henry's firstborn son, and with that, obviously, his reformers, his advisors would try to push for this Protestant change in England. And then after Edward dies of tuberculosis at a young age, who takes the throne then? And she tries to reverse everything of the Protestant change in England. What was her name? Batista?
Mary Tudor.
Yeah, Mary Tudor. Good job. What was another name for Mary Tudor? What's her name? Jacelyn? Yeah, Bloody Mary. Good. So she killed hundreds of people that tried to oppose her rule, right? And with that, obviously, she gets the nickname Bloody Mary. And again, she was trying to reverse all the Protestant change within England. She's trying to bring Catholicism back to England. And in many cases, actually did worse for her cause. Right? More people just separated themselves from the Catholic Church and its obviously teachings. All right, and then we get to the Counter-Reformation. So we talked a little bit on Friday about Ignatius of Loyola, and he's realizing that there needs to be a little bit of a change. And the Pope at the time, okay, he was Pope John III, he's also indicating that there needs to be some reforms, as there's a lot of sections of Europe separating itself from the Catholic Church. Right? You gotta look internally, you gotta focus on yourself. If a lot of people are just breaking off from the power of the church. So that's what Ignatius of Loyola is attempting to do, trying to reform the Catholic Church in many ways. And he does so through education. Right? He establishes schools that try to really focus on the teachings of the Catholic religion and the church to try to bring more people back to its loyalty and back to trusting the Catholic Church. So with that teaching, schools start to emerge all throughout Italy and even those in Central Europe. And it actually does do a pretty good job of bringing more people back, okay, through these teachings. He also wants to try to end the corruption of the Catholic leadership. So the goal there is to try to separate itself from these indulgences that we already talked about would cause the Protestant Reformation. Right? More people just weren't going for the church's order, the church's power. And with leadership, like we already mentioned, like we talked about, okay, with the Catholic Church, obviously there needs to be some sort of guidelines. There needs to be some sort of rules for them to follow. They just can't act unjust. They can't act in these really terrible factions and controlling the masses through fear. So the Council of Trent, this was a meeting that spanned over 10 years. Obviously, it wasn't continuously, but in any case, this was the Catholic Church's way of trying to reform, trying to change, try to look into a brighter destination to bring more people back to the Catholic Church. All right, so what the council was trying to change here for the Pope's control. So bishops needed to preach regularly and spend time in their dioceses, meaning they need to be focused in the area that they have control, that they have leadership over. And one of the biggest concerns of the Protestant Reformation is that these Catholic leaders, these church officials, weren't even residing in the area that they had power over, weren't even living in the jurisdiction. So again, that might just reach some more people to break away and not have a lot of trust or loyalty to the church. All right, and with priests, they had to be well educated. They had to be informed on the new laws, rules really established for the leadership to prevent them from being corrupt. And at the same time, they needed to follow the rules that they were preaching to the citizens and the people that they're expressing their religion to. And they can't be hypocrites anymore, right? They can't obviously force people to pay these indulgences and breaking the law themselves. That was one of the biggest issues that pushed for the Protestant Reformation. So they reaffirmed doctrines, role of good ethics, the authority of tradition, and with indulgences, right, they weren't enforcing that onto the people as much as before. I wouldn't say it still didn't happen, it still did. There's still a lot of push for fear into people's lives with this idea of purgatory and seeking salvation, where they wouldn't probably pull a lot of money out of the people, but for the most part, it was reform. They're doing their best to try to change it. All right, we also talked about the Romanian Inquisition, which you can even look at the Spanish Inquisition as a correlation with that. And what was that all about? What was this Inquisition? Chris, go ahead. Yeah, Roman Inquisition.
It was the agency established to combat Protestantism.
Yeah, okay, good. And how would they do that? What would they do? I talked a little bit about this on Friday. In many cases, this was really bloody, right? At first, before they even got to the Council of Trent, a lot of times they were even just killing many of these members that were embracing Protestantism, burning them at the stake, using it as an example to try not to change from Catholicism, try not to veer away from the Pope's rule. And they would target other forms of religions as well. But in many cases, this was almost like a genocide in a way. This was trying to take out a lot of these rival religions that were trying to challenge the Catholic Church. All right, so is there any questions on the Council of Trent, the Inquisition, Ignatius of Loyola? No? Okay, all right. So here's your bell ringer for today, just reviewing what we just talked about. Again, I just want to give you another point here. So describe what the Counter-Reformation was. Within your response, detail Ignatius of Loyola's role with the Jesuits. That's a term I didn't get to mention there within the presentation, but I know I had it up on Friday for your vocab term. And reform the Catholic Church. All right, so we just talked about it. Counter Reformation was a direct response from a lot of the change that's happening in Europe, right? And we already talked, we just reviewed it at the start of the day of this change in Europe with the Protestant Reformation and the English Reformation. So overall, when we see this counter Reformation happening, this is a way to try to do what? For the Catholic Church. Do what? Paul, go ahead. Yeah, right. To try to bring order to the Catholic Church, to try to revise it, to reform it, and to change it for the people to have a little bit more trust in the Catholic Church, into the Pope's rule. So again, the Counter-Reformation, this was a direct response from the Protestant Reformation and what we know of the English Reformation, and how to try to change and bring order back to the Catholic Church. So Ignatius of Loyola, okay, with the Jesuits, the Society of Jesus, right? They're going to try to bring order to the church, and through the Council of Trent, they advise a lot of these religious leaders to focus a little bit more on education, to focus more on the teachings and providing information about the Catholic Church, and really just bringing more of a central focus on the Bible as well. So with the Catholic response, the Counter-Reformation, Ignatius of Loyola, his goal is to try to educate the people more by establishing schools for the teachings of Catholicism, and at the same time, trying to bring a little bit more of a sense of leadership for the Catholic officials. And they can't just act in these unjust ways that brought on the Protestant Reformation. Poor people just won't associate themselves with the Catholic Church. They'll separate and try to leave for one of these emerging religions that we already mentioned, with the Reformation, with the Protestant movement, let's say the Calvinists, right? Zwingli and his movement, his emergence of his view of religion and Christianity. Okay, there's many different routes that they can choose. So with that, the Catholic Church, their power is declining. So they had to reform, they had to change. And that all happens here with Ignatius of Loyola, the Jesuits, and the Council of Trent. They try to reform the church. All right, is there any questions on that? The Counter-Reformation. Okay, all right. So tomorrow we're going to move more into the age of exploration. Okay, I was going to separate and have just a whole chapter based off of it, but I think we'll just go in a different route where I'll give a little bit of a description of some of these explorers, right? What country that they're exploring for, the reasons for it, what they may have found, and then towards the end of the week, okay, I'll assign it for tomorrow, but you guys will get into groups and you'll research one of these explorers, and then you'll have to come up with a presentation for the rest of the class. So in a way, right, I'll give you a little brief description of some of these explorers, but you're going to do a little bit more further research into obviously coming up with a presentation to explain these explorers to the rest of the class. So I'll have that assignment up more tomorrow. But today I just want to give you guys this assignment here on the Counter-Reformation. I think it's important to talk about now the Catholic Church is trying to really make sure that this total change doesn't occur and reform the church in its order. Chris?
So we're not gonna read a whole biography of Martin Luther.
We talked about Martin Luther a little bit here already. I mean, it's one of those things where if I got to keep moving, there's still a lot to go over. There's still a lot to talk about. But real quick, guys, so here's the assignment for today. Go to modules. Yeah.
So when I was looking at the lesson,
Yeah.
there was like a link right there.
To the assignment.
Was that what it was? Like, is that the?
Yeah, but I didn't publish it yet.
Okay, that when I clicked in it, I was like, wait, this isn't on my tablet.
Could you access it?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna have it for you for Friday to have it due for today, but I was like, you know what? We'll just review it. We'll talk about it more because all I did was go over the vocab terms. So I wanted to make sure I gave you those 2 slides, reviewed it with you, and now here's the assignment. So you click on the Catholic Reformation assignment, and here it is. So there's certain sections you have to read through, and there's a few questions that follow suit. Okay, that's it, right there. So I'll give you the rest of the time to work on this assignment. I'll play some music for you. Is that what you guys want? Some music? All right, you have to be working now.